So I thought today we would talk about Ahsoka Tano. I always want to say Osaka, but that is not the name. That is a Japanese word. Anyways, Ahsoka. For the first time, literally the first time for a Star Wars live action thing, whether it's a show or a movie, for the first time, I didn't get around to watching it on day one. I watched, obviously the original trilogy, I was either not born or I was a little baby, so that doesn't count. But I was there for the prequels day one. I hated all of them, but I was there day one. There for the sequel trilogy, day one. Mandalorian had a screener, so before day one. Every single one. Boba Fett. Didn't like it, but I watched it on day one. Mandalorian season 2, Mandalorian season 3, Andor, Obi-Wan, all of them. And the thing is that out of all of those, and then also Rogue One and a Solo, a Star Wars story, I was there for those day one. Out of all of those, so few ended up being really great. A lot of them ended up being, pretty mediocre, and some enough have been straight up bad. Especially the Disney Plus shows. I think Mandalorian season 1 and 2 were good, and I think Andor was great. But everything else has been bad. Boba Fett, Book of Boba Fett, terrible. Obi-Wan Kenobi, even worse somehow. How you take the character Obi-Wan and make a bad show is with Ewan McGregor no less. How you do that is beyond me. And then Mandalorian season 3 was just the icing on the cake because it was actually legitimately terrible. I don't know how they took such a good show and butchered it so badly. And I don't think it was because Mando was less of the focus of that show. I think it was really just a combination of factors, including just an over-reliance on cameos, a real drop in writing quality and dialogue, etc., etc. Anyways, that for me, I think Mandalorian season 3, coming on the heels of Andor, really made me think nobody in charge over there knows what they're doing, except for the people that make Andor. That's the only people doing Star Wars stuff right now, that's at least movies and TV shows, that know what the hell they're doing. Because, I do like some of the Star Wars games, like Respawn's Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor. Those I think are really good. But in the movie and TV space, it feels like Lucasfilm has completely lost the thread. Kathleen Kennedy and everyone working for her outside of Andor had just completely lost the thread. And with Mandalorian, I think Jon Favreau did some great work, but I have less faith in Dave Filoni, who seems really hit or miss. Yes, some of the Clone Wars, some of Rebels is really good. Some of it is also really not good. And now we get to, Mandalorian season 3, which Filoni was part of, and the writing quality was just so bad. And now Ahsoka. So Ahsoka, I didn't watch for days. Days. For the first time ever, I waited days after it was released to watch it. I just couldn't bring myself to. Now that's partly is where I've been at in my own headspace, where I'm not been in a great mental place, but partly that's also that I was just dreading it. Instead of being excited for it, I was dreading it. So I finally watched Ahsoka, both episodes that are out, and I have to say, I think because my expectations were so low, it was better than I expected it would be, but also realistically, it's worse than it should be. Right? So I was like, okay, this is actually not as bad as Obi-Wan. This is not as bad as Book of Boba Fett. This is not as bad as the last season of The Mandalorian. But it should be at least as good as the first season of The Mandalorian. I'm not going to say it should be as good as Andor because I'm sorry. Nothing is as good as Andor in Star Wars. I wish they would just, make everything in Star Wars as good as Andor. Then I would be a super happy Star Wars fan. But realistically, like this show, it gets some things right and it gets some things wrong. Okay, so what it gets right is the bad guys seem pretty cool this time around. A pretty good upgrade from recent bad guys in other Disney shows and movies. I like Balin Skull. Ray Stevenson's character. Unfortunately, Ray Stevenson has passed away, so that's terrible and tragic. But he's so talented, and I loved him in Rome as Titus. And here he's a somber, thoughtful, interesting, intriguing villain. At one point, he talks about how he would hate to kill Ahsoka because there are so few Jedi left. It would be a shame. That's such an interesting take on a bad guy. He's not just like pure evil Sith, but there's like some humanity in there. But he still obviously craves power. And then it's Shin Hati? I don't know. I like her. She's a badass. It's so often that when they're trying to make badass female characters these days that they're not badass. They just like pretend badass. But she's got this wildness to her and this, I don't know, it's almost like an innocence, but also like a wild, hungry, kind of crazy badassery that I really think works well and that she does a good job with. Those two are great. I really like them. There's one of the Dathomir Night Sisters if you played Fallen Order or Jedi Survivor, you will have encountered them. And I think they're in some other like Clone Wars or Rebels somewhere, but she's like a witch. Her name's Morgan Elspeth. I'm interested in the Night Sisters for lore purposes. I'm not sold on her character. She's pretty one note compared to Balin and his sort of fascinating inner world that we don't really know much about. But she seems more like, bwahaha, twirly mustache. We're going to go get Thrawn. And I'll go get more into the Thrawn stuff in a minute. Chopper is great. Of course, if you watched Rebels, you'll know Chopper, the little psychopathic, foul-mouthed droid. Lovely character. He's great in live action. Huyang, I might be saying that wrong, voiced by David Tennant. Also great. Honestly, one of my favorite characters in the show, and it's a droid who's got more humanity and depth than most of the human protagonists in this show, which is kind of odd. But those are both great droid characters. So those are sort of that's what the characters that work for me in this show. And then we've got Ahsoka, Sabine, and Hera. And I just gotta say, I am not impressed. And it's not even that they're trying to go like full girl boss, which I think is one of the most, I talked about this in a recent video. I think it's one of the most unfortunate, like female empowerment mistakes that modern entertainment has turned to. Like we need to make all our strong female characters just like really, really bland and one note and like better than everybody. And basically just the most vapid, uninteresting, uncomplicated versions of human people that are human beings, whatever, whether they're male or female. But this girl boss meme, this girl boss trope, is infecting a lot of media. And instead of making truly strong female characters, they just have these sort of one-dimensional female characters that are badass. But I don't think that's the main problem here. I expect Ahsoka to be badass. She's essentially a Jedi. I don't think she never actually became a full-fledged Jedi, but she is a powerful Force user. So I expect her to be badass, but I also expect her to be like Ahsoka from the animated shows, where there's a bit of fire, a bit of pep, a bit of verve, a bit of playfulness, a bit of, there's just a lot more to her character than what Rosario Dawson is bringing to the role. She seems to me very, very bland. A really boring character to have a whole show revolve around. I would much rather, here's the fact. If you took Luke Skywalker and you put him in the role of Ahsoka in this show, it would make more sense. The whole show would make more sense. The timing, the fact that this is post Return of the Jedi, and the fact that that all the Thrawn stuff does take place with Luke in the books by Timothy Zahn, but really in his character, who is sort of, by the time Return of the Jedi is around, he is kind of a withdrawn, more somber, more that's his character, that's his personality. It's like Ahsoka is trying to be Luke Skywalker, and it just doesn't click for me. And it doesn't click also because her and Sabine and Hera are all So Sabine, played by Natasha Liu Bordizzo, if I'm saying that right, and then of course Hera is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's Ewan McGregor's new wife. They all seem bland. Like Sabine is apparently like a 35-year-old teenager. She's all angsty, like, I have orders. The guy says to her, the pilot, you need to pull over. And what's her line? It's like, how about these orders? Get lost. It's like, you're just being written as such this angsty, like irritating woman. Like why can't they write this woman like to be her age at least? I didn't mind Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Hera. I think the main problem that I have, and I've really enjoyed her character in like Scott Pilgrim and 10 Cloverfield Lane, in season 3 of Fargo. I thought she was great. But I think the problem I'm having with these three actresses and these three roles is that it feels like they don't know each other. They all feel very stiff and like unfamiliar. But these are old companions. Like, they've been on some runs together. They've fought in a war together. They're, these people know each other intimately, deeply, and yet they all feel so, they just feel like strangers. And it's a really weird thing. And then this is not helped by the way dialogue is written and acted and in the direction that this is taken. Dialogue, it feels very janky. It feels very like the pacing is off. It feels too formal, and there's too many pauses, and it's just, you're kind of just watching this like, why do they talk to each other this way? It's just so strange. So that doesn't help. And again, I think that of those three, like they maybe did a little bit too much girl boss with Sabine, but Ahsoka's problem is more that she is just too boring. Hera, again, I think is fine. I liked her scene with Chopper. She's just, I guess there's just not much there yet. So I don't know. But I thought she was fine. I feel like if you haven't watched Rebels, this is going to be a hard show to get into, though it doesn't necessarily need to be. But I feel like if you have watched Rebels, you're going to constantly be comparing all these characters to the versions of them in the cartoon. And it's not always flattering. There's also characters missing from the cartoon. And that's weird. They're not even really talked about except for Ezra, and that's weird. I won't get into that because I would like to judge this show on its own merits rather than as a direct comparison to Rebels. It is in many ways a new season of Rebels, but anyways, some other things. The puzzles. They're like the map. Ugh. Why on earth did they need to have another map? This plot device is getting so old. With Star Wars in particular, we've had, the search for Luke Skywalker, the search for the Sith planet, and they're always finding these maps, and then they take the map, and they hold the map up a certain way, and they go through the stars, and they find the way to get to whatever stupid thing. It's just so MacGuffin-y. And it's been done before. It's so old now. So I don't understand why we had to do the map. Like, so Ezra and Thrawn, Admiral Thrawn, like, were hyperspace transported by Purrgil. If I'm saying that right, there's like space whales to another galaxy, it turns out. So this map like shows where they went somehow. I'm not really sure, but they could have just had the characters like figure out the migration patterns of the Purrgil, and through like interesting science-y space fantasy research, they're like, this is where they go. If we follow this route, we'll find them. But instead, they have these video game puzzles that are like infantile Rubik's cubes, and like, it's just both the scenes with Ahsoka and with Sabine, figuring out like, Ahsoka's like turning the wheel, and she's like walking around all slow and dramatic, and it's like that's like a really easy video game puzzle. Like, this is not impressive at all. And then the little map that Sabine figures out, it's like an idiot's Rubik's cube. So I just find all that stuff super grating. Like, I know this is a kids show, right? It's Star Wars. It's for kids, but you don't need to dumb down your Star Wars this much. So none of that resonated with me. Like, the map, it's so gimmicky. I just hate it. Right as soon as it was like, she has to find the map, I was just like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And then when it was these puzzles, blah blah blah, that was all stupid. Sabine at one point gets stabbed with a lightsaber. Shin stabs her with a lightsaber, and the first episode ends there. And I was like, you know what? If they kill off Sabine in the first episode, that's ballsy. Like, that is ballsy. I would be so on board with that. Nothing against Sabine. It's just a really ballsy move. But of course, in the next episode, it's like 4 hours later and she's fine. Like, no big deal. Doesn't even need a back to tank. She's just up. No, she's not up. She's in bed, but she's totally fine. Because lightsabers have been nerfed to hell. You get hit with a lightsaber now, you're just fine. You're going to be fine. You get hit with a lightsaber, if you're Obi-Wan, old Obi-Wan, or Qui-Gon, you're dead, man. But these days, you Reva, the High Inquisitor, Sabine, it's no big deal. And I have to say, you know, I thought it was kind of funny when Luke Skywalker, like, tossed the lightsaber and was, like, calling them laser swords. Like, I was like, grumpy old man. Cool, I can be down with Luke as a grumpy old man. But I have to say that was like a foreshadowing of things to come, where lightsabers have just turned into this joke, really. And that's unfortunate, because lightsabers are freaking cool. That's one of the coolest parts of Star Wars. And now it just feels like they're just, you know, it's like you could get stabbed with a kitchen knife or a lightsaber. It makes no difference. Yeah. So there's just lots of little annoying things going on, but there's enough interesting stuff still that ties into Rebels, and Clone Wars, and into, you know, the Thrawn trilogy, that I think I'm still excited to watch it and see what happens. Speaking of Thrawn, I know I need to just finish with Thrawn. I hate that he's being set up as like this mystical messianic savior figure for the Empire. We need to go to another galaxy and bring back Thrawn. And if they bring back Thrawn, it means war and power. And it's like, Thrawn's like an admiral, and he's a good tactician. But, he wasn't even that popular among the Imperials, because he's not human, right? He's a blue alien guy. He had to really assert himself before other people took him seriously. The way that they're setting it up here is that he's being treated almost like he's the Empire or the Emperor reborn, which we know doesn't happen until, you know, Episode 9, and that whole nonsense. I think it's just much more interesting to have Thrawn stand on his own 2 feet rather than be propped up with all this, like, like he's coming back and it's going to change everything. Sort of like the flip side to the New Republic being just run by a bunch of idiots, like the captain in the first scene who just lets Baylan and Shin on his ship like la-di-da. Like in this show and in Mandalorian, we've seen the New Republic be just portrayed as like the most incompetent morons ever. And the problem with that is that it's just not that interesting to, you know, incompetence can be an interesting plot device, right? If you have someone incompetent who keeps making mistakes that then make things harder for other characters, that can be an interesting way to present a story. Because it's true, in this world, there are incompetent managers, there are incompetent people, and they can cause a lot of problems. But if you just are constantly making your other characters look tough or badass because other people are incompetent, that's not very interesting. And they've just been doing this with the New Republic over and over again. It's kind of getting old. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that. We'll see where Episode 3 goes. Right now, I wouldn't say I'm cautiously optimistic. I would say I am hopefully pessimistic. Like, I think it might be good enough to be entertaining and to propel the story forward a bit, but it also just, I don't think it's going to be good enough to really satisfy. And there's one other big problem here with all of these shows, and it's that we know what happens. Like, we already had the sequel trilogy, so we know all the shit that happens. We know that by the end of that, all the Skywalkers are dead, and only Palpatine's offspring survive. We know what happens to the New Republic. It gets fucked up. The First Order or whatever comes in, and then there's the Sith planet with the thousands of Death Stars, and they get beat because the galaxy rallies, and it's just like, the ending is so bad. It's like rewatching Game of Thrones. I love it. It's an amazing show. But I know where it goes. And it's like, I'm never going to be satisfied now. So they need to just retcon and delete the sequel trilogy completely so that we can actually move forward to something better. And then you can actually get excited about shows like Ahsoka and The Mandalorian that maybe lead to something new. And that's the only fix that I can even imagine for it. You'd have to literally wipe the sequel trilogy out. I would wipe the prequel trilogy out too. But the sequel trilogy is more important because it's at the end. And if we could write a new ending for Star Wars, well, then there might be some hope for it. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, liking, subscribing. Sorry for my lack of content lately. I don't know what's wrong with me. Anyways, peace.